Hello and welcome to first episode of Lily and Cleo's Talk of Fantasy Worlds. How are you doing today, Lily?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, Clio. How are you?
A little confined, a little bit. Is the term stir crazy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't quite sure.
Um, Today we are going to be talking about The Witcher. We're going to divide our attention between the games, the books, and the Netflix adaptation.
Yeah, would you, so you've only read, not read, watched the Netflix series, right?
Yes, I've been meaning to read the books for the longest time, based on your recommendations and recommendations from a couple other of my friends, but I just never get around to it.
Right, right. And um, again, the Netflix series is almost a replica of the books, so it'll be
Yes.
interesting to talk about here in the future. I don't think
And
we'll.
you've read all of the books, played the games, and watched the series.
Yes.
So Cleo is our expert today.
I had to brush up a little bit. It's been a while, and then searched up a lot of articles and such. So just kind of get a very clear and accurate discussion here coming up. Um, and I won't really go into the games really because actually the author Sapkowski um, has publicly said the games are not canon in any which way. So
Yeah, Cleo sent me an article before this, talking about the differences between the books, the games, and the TV show. And it was talking about how the games are more inspired by the books than an adaptation like the show is.
right. So let's jump right into it then, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
All right, perfect. So we're gonna start off with just general like world. Um, what is your overall impression of this Witcher fantasy world?
I feel like it's very cool the way the author and the author draws from like Eastern European and like
Hmm.
Russian folklore. I think that's really interesting and that like not as many people pull directly from those sources. I think that adds like just like really awesome elements to the story, really cool concepts to play with. I feel like overall it's like kind of like gritty, like darker fantasy, which is
Mm,
very fun. You got spins on like just like European like not mythology but like folk tales. Like
right.
you have vampires, but in The Witcher you have uh, are Striga vampires? I can't even remember.
Um, I don't recall. I feel like Striga was one of those bestial creatures, but there
Never
are
mind
off of the top of my head, Bruxa, I'm pretty sure,
then. Okay.
are a form of
Um
like primitive vampire.
yeah, but just in that vein, like I like the just the Eastern European theme that kind of runs through
Right,
with
it's a
still
unique
like regular
flavor.
fantasy elements.
Right. It's a
Yeah.
unique flavor that makes it stand out from everything else.
Mhm.
Um,
Even though you still have like dragons and like elves, it just kind of it fleshes out like the very prototypical fantasy world for me.
right. And I have to say, both the Netflix and the books um, definitely portray this very gritty and honestly like a very depressing world.
Yeah.
It's it's just like one thing after another, and a big theme in Geralt's career is that he barely survives every job that he makes, which kind of emphasizes that gritty, dark fantasy world.
Hmm.
Um, which plays in, I have to say, Eastern European sort of like stories and folk tales are very gritty and dark, sort of
Yeah.
that like its own flavor of like grim fairy tales, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I was looking through, there's the different classifications of fantasy worlds, and we have like high and low level fantasy,
Yeah.
and the high fantasy being there's like big powers going after each other, good and evil, and lower level fantasy, not that as much. I think
Mhm.
this world is a bit more unique because I feel like it portrays both of those sort of themes.
Yeah,
Uh,
there are like the larger struggles between like necessarily like the forces of good and evil, even though our protagonist may not necessarily like be completely entrenched in those struggles. Like he's
yeah.
involved, but he's not
He doesn't want to be a part of it at
yeah.
any point. That adds a little bit of
Geralt
the
is like he's a force for fairness, but maybe not necessarily good.
no. He definitely does not want to be involved in a lot that's happening in the world, and it just so happens that things like drag him in to be part of these big world politics, even though he tries to be
Yes.
neutral the entire time.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to explain it. He gets dragged into it a lot.
Right, and he's there sitting stoically, and he's like, if I had to pick between two evils, I'd rather not pick at all. And then
Yeah.
he repeatedly picks, and you feel for Geralt a little bit.
Hmm.
All right, well, let's go into the magic system of the world then. What's your idea about the magic system?
Um, this is okay. Are you're aware of the theories on hard and soft magic systems? I think we've talked about this before.
Right, yes.
Which would you classify like the witch as like what magic system is?
Well, so in the Netflix series, um, they talk about drawing in from chaos,
Hmm.
and it's not exactly innate magic in any way. It's a little bit weird. Um, in the
So
books,
it's a little bit wishy-washy, like not like wishy-washy in a bad way, but softer in general.
yeah, a little bit softer.
Like
It
the rules are not like laid out for you.
Not exactly. I think Sapkowski kind of cuts a little bit of corners, saying there's like a quote that he's like, "It's magic and blessing and science and all at once." That's how he describes like the magic within this world. Without really going into it further, there is a scene between Yennefer and Ciri in the books, uh, where Yennefer teaches Ciri some magic, and the way that she describes magic is that she opens pockets in the world and pulls out the energy of different elements. Um, so I think he tries to have a little bit of an explanation with like scientific, drawing in from the elements, sort of magic system. But other than that, I don't really think there is a very strong support of how it all works.
Right. It is very cool to watch though, especially like, different like varieties of magic essentially. Um like magic, I put that in quotes because like their heightened abilities are like due to like experimentation and like they're not necessarily human anymore.
Hmm.
Um and that is a result of magic, but I don't know if it's magic in and of itself. Um I don't know a ton about like the process of becoming a witcher. Um
Right.
but it seems different from like the magic that Yennefer practices. Like,
Yes. There's like a running joke I remember in the games where Yennefer makes fun of Geralt's magic. They essentially all the sorcerers they're like, oh, we have pure magic, and all these witches have this sort of primitive level magic, and of course Geralt responds brusquely and is like, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
I, in terms of magic, I think I'm pretty sure in the world anybody can use magic, but different
Yeah, if
people
you're
have like
trained.
different innate abilities with it.
Yes. Because Yennefer has like the really super like OP innate ability, but she has no education at the beginning
Right.
of her story
Yes.
and has no control over it, which I think, oh, I love that as a concept. The like having so much power and not being able to control it kind of trope. I love when that's used, and
Yeah.
they use it really well in this story.
Then she has those moments of catharsis in the Netflix series that really exhibit her chaotic energy. She's like the wild
Yeah,
card of the group.
yes, I love that, and I love that about her. I love Yennefer as a character. I almost said Jennifer.
um, yeah, but in the books they don't really go into that. She's definitely portrayed as a very strong sorceress, right? She has strong innate abilities, but they never go into her origin story in the books and how she tames it. She just she comes in the story being, a badass bitch, you know?
Yeah. How did you like the way that in the Netflix series they did expand upon that and like give her essentially a fleshed out origin story?
Um, it was kind of weird to me, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Especially, I wish they introduced her first sort of romantic character, in a different way, Istrid. But they, in order, if they were gonna show Yennefer's origin story, I think it worked out. But in terms of like the her taking control of her magic, it just was a stereotypical sort of, oh, she seems like the runt, um, of the
Hmm.
group, and then she progressively proves herself, overcomes her insecurities. Um, she faces that trial without any, um, what's the term, like numbers,
Hmm.
make her like fall asleep during the procedure. Um, she definitely, as an audience member, it she felt more real to me since she overcame that. But I don't know. I think the whole storyline was a little bit cheesy, in my opinion.
I felt like it was a little bit cheesy as well. And the whole thing, I like that they talk about like beauty being another form of power, but it also feels like strange to have like the really ugly character become more beautiful, like have that essentially like makeover scene, which it's not a makeover scene, but like
Yeah.
it's a metaphorical makeover
It's
scene.
it's it's not like Princess Diaries with Anne Hathaway
Exactly,
becoming a
but you don't have the
princess.
before and after picture.
Yes.
But she's up into the ball, and she's filmed like she's so gorgeous. She's so powerful.
Right.
Um,
And a thing about Yennefer's character in all different versions of her, in the books, uh, Geralt describes her as flawlessly beautiful, but
mhm,
he has enough keen senses, he says, to notice these small imperfections in her. And I feel like in the movies they talked about this like surgical procedure to make them perfect. And the books they don't really go into that, and it's more so it just feels like, oh, these sorceresses, they're just natural beauties, which is
yeah.
obviously not true, but it's to add to the
Mhm.
allure and the pretentiousness as well as dominant feeling that you get from this group of sorceresses. But Geralt has a soft enough heart to be like, oh, you think you're perfect, but I see your imperfections, but I still love you for it.
Yeah, which is really sweet.
It is very
Um,
sweet.
Another thing about beauty, um, in the comparison article that you sent me, it talks about how Geralt in the books is not necessarily like a handsome guy.
No.
He's kind of unsettling.
Yeah, that
And he's
picture
like,
is gruesome.
yeah, he's skinny and he's scarred all over and he's got like a not like a pleasing voice. He's got like the dark, like scary eyes.
Right.
How do
So,
you feel about like the change from that to the games and to the series? And how do you feel about Henry Cavill
Henry Cavill.
playing Geralt?
Um, so starting off with the like book series Geralt, I have to say book Geralt is my favorite Geralt, and that's
Yeah.
because so both the Netflix series and the games they portray Geralt as this very aloof, um, short, um, short. He always gives short answers. He's very brusque. He's sarcastic. Um,
Hmm.
in the books, he's a little bit talkative, and he he's a bit of a sweetheart in the books.
Yeah.
And I don't get that from the games and the Netflix series. In the books, they describe him as this very, he's scary individual and everything, but he has a heart, and there are different stories that kind of show how sad he is all the time, and he really just has a tragic life. And again, and everything but the books, there's this theme of everything just goes wrong. No matter what you choose, there's always some sort of negative consequence. And Geralt seems really depressed and he takes in all these feelings all the time. Um, but in comparison to that, how would you describe the Netflix series, Geralt?
Um, I mean, he is the only Geralt that I know, and I like the strong silent type, like the archetype. I think it's
Right.
a fun comp to play with. And it can be done really well, and Henry Cavill did it really well. I love Henry Cavill. I mean, not necessarily. I haven't said I really don't care about Superman movies, but his work in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., like he's a really good actor. He knows how to work his face, and I feel like he brings to this role like as like the game Geralt that they've kind of transferred
Yes.
to the series, not necessarily as book Geralt, because I feel like they did pretty much leave book Geralt in the books.
Right. Yes, Henry Cavill was superb as Geralt, and I think the fandom really prefers game Geralt. So Netflix, I think, made a smarter decision in translating game Geralt to the Netflix Geralt rather than book
Yeah.
Geralt. But all right. Well, then I also wanted to mention the Henry Cavill's sort of chemistry with who's the guy who plays Haskier?
Oh, I have no idea. His name is oh gosh, I have it. Let me. Okay. Joey Baby.
Joey Baby. They were superb, and the books are funny. And that would be surprising, but they're funny, and I think they translated the humorous relationship between Dandelion and Geralt very well. Um,
Even though the friendship is kind of like one-sided at times, like
right.
Geralt seems to really care about Jaskier.
Yes.
Um, and I know a lot of people picked up on that.
Oh yes, there's a, a lot on
There's a
Tumblr.
big following for
Yes.
I think it's Jaraskier is the ship name.
Oh my gosh. Pretty cute.
Um, it's very cute. But let's move on. Um,
Okay.
Impressions about the politics.
What the major, I think the major idea of this universe is politics is annoying, which I feel like that's a lot about
Yes.
everything, but especially with Geralt. Geralt's like, I don't want to be any part of these politics.
Yeah, we see it from his viewpoint, and he's just like, "Oh God, I hate this.
Yeah.
I think this is so stupid."
Yeah, he's just like, all that matters to me is I finish this contract, get my money. I wake up in some random ditch somewhere after like passing out.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't really care about who's fighting who and
Hmm.
what you want from me. And that's another added humor, but also an added plot throughout the story because he gets dragged into some of these political messes, especially Siri, who is a big political card. So
Yes,
politics,
absolutely.
yes. So poli- politics is a very important mm, develop developer in the series plot, even though Geralt doesn't want it to be.
Yeah, it's always in the background, kind of affecting like things around him and therefore his decisions.
Right.
He just kind of becomes wrapped up in it without really wanting to.
hmm Would you say, while watching the Netflix series, that you understood the politics that was going on?
For the most part, yes. Like Nilfgaard wants to invade. What country are we in?
Oh, it starts with the R, Redania, I'm pretty sure.
Dania. Nilfgaard wants to invade um the royals in, say the name again, Nadania,
Redania, yeah.
Redania. Um, Ciri's grandmother essentially like rejected the Nilfgaard like sons as bachelors for her daughter. She thought they were. She was like, "Your country is weak. Like
hmm
you don't deserve my daughter." And they took that as a great insult. At least the one who ended up being actually the king of Nilfgaard, who is like a religious zealot.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
I don't completely remember
Yeah, it's
or
a little
understand
bit, yeah.
his motivations, but he definitely is. He's very 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 motivated to conquer this country and find Ciri.
Right. And that, I think if that's what you drew from the Netflix series, then you're at a good point of understanding what's to come. I think then they successfully portrayed the politics then, 100%.
Okay, super, because that's after like a couple months of not having watched it. Because I did watch it like all at once,
Right.
traditional. Um,
Well, Ciri is the daughter of like a separate little minor kingdom, although I wouldn't
okay,
really call them minor. At that point, they were pretty strong. Um, the kingdom of Sintra and Queen Calanthe.
okay.
So, all right. Well,
Mm,
moving on then. What was your favorite parts of the Netflix TV series?
oh man, that's definitely a toughie. I mean, probably when Yennefer like goes absolutely wild in the finale, and like lets out all of her magic, and she's like bleeding from the nose, and it's just like it's such a powerful scene.
Right.
She just, oh, there's just so much emotion in that, just like screaming like with the fire coming out of her hands. I just think it was a very well done scene.
What if I told you that that entire battle and scene was not described in the book.
I love that.
um,
Um,
all that
you
is
go ahead.
okay. Well, all that is mentioned about this battle. Um,
Hmm.
Geralt. The books kind of center around Geralt. It's never really around Yennefer.
Hmm.
And Geralt is traveling and he hears about this battle of Sodden Hill. And of course he has a soft spot for Yennefer, right? And so he hears about,
Definitely.
oh, this big group of sorcerers and sorceresses got together and had this battle, and they have a giant rock with a lot of names on it, um, of people who died in that battle. And Geralt has like a heart attack because he's like, what if Yennefer has died? But
Yeah.
that's pretty much all that you really get of it, besides, characters reflecting back on that battle. But you don't get that moment with Yennefer where she has a explosion of power. So
Hmm.
it definitely subtracts that from the book. I would definitely not call the the Witcher book series exactly super feminist, and that
Mm,
uh, presentation of female power.
gotcha. Um, I wanted to ask this question. Where does the series timeline, like, I mean, multiple timelines fall within the books?
Right. So there's two books that the Netflix series really capture on, which is The Last Wish, and ooh, uh, the sword one. Shoot, what's the name of it? I'm gonna Google it. The Witcher book series. Because I just speed read them. Like, I wasn't even looking at the name. Sword of Destiny. There we go. So the
Gotcha.
Netflix series covers the short stories between The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, and then adds in the beginning of Blood of Elves. We only get introduced to Sintra collapsing in the beginning of the saga. That's how the saga officially starts. Otherwise, this Netflix series draws in from the prequels of the books. Um,
Okay.
and so these two books jump around a lot, and they just kind of try to illustrate this kind of world. And my certain quips with the Netflix series is, oh, why didn't they include this story and why didn't they include that story? Um,
Mhm.
and I think the answer of that is they wanted to include Yennefer's origin story in there. So they had
Yeah,
to,
and you only have so much screen time.
right, so they removed a lot of those stories. And I think one detrimental part about that is in the books, Geralt and Ciri interact with each other before the Battle of Sintra. And in the
Okay.
Netflix series, it jumps back
They
and
never see
forth.
each other.
Yeah, you keep thinking like, oh, does Geralt know Ciri? Do they ever like talk to each other? And it seems as if the only time that they do like interact with each other is when in the end, where they
Hmm.
hug each other in the woods. Um, the only thing in terms of God, the timelines really just don't exactly match up because they had the insertion of an entire new story of Yennefer's um, backstory. The only thing that was representative was Geralt. The first story, one of the first stories being Geralt's interaction with Renfri and Strigobor. I'm pretty sure
Hmm.
that's the first episode. Um, then there's the story with the Striga, yeah, with King
Hmm.
Foltest. And then there's the Jin story. So in terms of that, they parallel very well with Geralt's storyline. But when they when they included Yennefer and Ciri's storyline, it's a little bit wonky. Uh,
Yeah, especially the way they do it in the show, because at first I didn't know that they were skipping around in time. And it honestly wasn't even a barrier for comprehension. Like, watching it, I became a little confused because I was like, wait a minute, this isn't taking place at the same time. Like, these events couldn't be co-occurring. Like, you flash like essentially back to when like the Witcher and like the Queen first, like, I don't know, first met, I think, and she was like, "Oh, I've heard about you."
Yes.
And he was like, he was like,
Yes.
um like he is. And I was like, wait a minute, obviously this can't be happening at the same time. She's way younger. We're skipping in time. Okay, like, but once you get it, like, you completely, like, you understand like
Yeah.
what's going on, the larger arc. It's easier to see.
Right. By the end of it, it becomes you go, ah, this all makes
Yes,
sense.
exactly. Which
It,
is a nice feeling
yes.
because it makes you feel smart.
It makes you feel smart. Um, I I definitely have some quips with how they represented Siri. And but other than that, again, everything with Henry Cavill in it and Haskier was absolutely phenomenal. I actually think that was fantastic.
Yeah.
But it a very pivotal character is Ciri, right? And we've talked a lot about Geralt and Yennefer, but in the books, it's mainly just in the start of the saga. Ciri is actually pretty much the main character. What is your impression of Ciri in the Netflix series?
This seems like an origin story for Siri. Like, it seems like it's focusing on like Yennefer's backstory in the beginning of her story, Geralt's just whole thing, maybe not necessarily maybe including a little taste of his backstory, because we kind of get the stuff, especially when he's dying and he's having these hallucinations of his mother
Mhm.
who gave him away. But for Siri, it feels like entirely like this is prologue for Siri. Like
Right.
her story has not started yet.
Yes. And she has an exciting story, and it's important. I want to see if you were able to identify with this character through the Netflix series.
I mean, I don't know if I identify with her. There's not like I mean, I do. She's very like she's kind of like she's a strong young woman. She's capable, but like even though like she's a kid and she's had too much put on her for being a kid, like she realizes that she has like a greater destiny, and like that's a heavy thing. That's
Right.
definitely a heavy thing, and she becomes like a refugee, which is even crazier, in a hated refugee at that. Like everywhere she goes, she hears about like, oh, like the queen is horrible. We hate her, her entire family. Man, if I met any of them, I would just kill them. And I'm just like sitting there like Siri, just kind of like
Yeah.
bun in her hair, like she's like,
Yeah, childhood scarring. She thinks, everything was completely fine and now I'm out here and everyone wants me dead. That sort of.
yes,
So you feel some sort of like hurting for her because of these experiences that she's having.
yeah.
Okay.
And she's also like she's a compassionate character. Like she's good. Like she's good-hearted.
Right. All right. What were your least favorite parts of the Witcher series?
Um, man, I have to think about that. If you already have one, you definitely can go first.
Um, all right. Well, we've talked about how Yennefer's storyline was a little bit cheesy. Um,
Mhm.
I will. Okay, I'm gonna say two things. First thing, the character of Istrid, right? Her other love choice and all.
Yes.
In the books, with the short stories, we find out who Istrid is. only through one little short story, and other than that, he's like out of the picture. So it's just a side note, it's going to be interesting to see how they incorporate his character in the future Netflix series. But there's a really
Yeah.
fun story where uh, Yennefer and Geralt are on and off all the time, and the story starts off with them being on and on. And Yennefer has a job where Istrid is, and she goes to visit him a lot, right? And there's this super comical scene where Geralt is like, of course he's jealous, right? And he knows that
Mhm.
Istrid was a past lover, and so he finally decides, okay, I'm gonna put my foot down and I'm gonna talk to Istrid and say you need to back off. And Istrid's they have a heated argument about this, and Istrid's like, well, what makes you think that she prefers you over me? And Geralt says, well, because she had sex with me last night. And and Geralt then says, well, what makes you think that she prefers you over me then, since we had sex last night? And Istrid says, well, because we had sex this morning.
Oh my God.
And I it's not an essential thing in part of the plot, but I feel like I missed that scene in the Netflix
Yeah.
series. Um,
I feel like Istrid in the series is a little bit like he's a little bit washed out. Like he doesn't seem like a fully fleshed out character to
no,
me.
he seems
Um,
auxiliary.
exactly. He acts as a plot device at sometimes, like he acts as like a tempting motivation for Yennefer to like not go for what she really wants, which is power. Like Yennefer is a power hungry character. That is her driving motivation, and I
Hmm.
super love that because we love feral women.
We love feral women.
But Istrid just like I think he's super handsome. Like great casting
Yeah,
choice.
he has
But his
beautiful eyes.
personality for me is just yeah, his eyes. Like I caught myself staring in his eyes every time he was on screen. How dreamy. Um, but his personality is just it's lackluster for me. I think it's a familiarity thing for her, for the most part.
Right.
And
Um,
him betraying her for no other reason than his own gain by like revealing her secret about her quarter elf heritage. I'm just like, you can leave now.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care about you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Irrelevant now. Um,
irrelevant.
my second thing, and then I'll ask you about your least favorite part. Um,
Okay.
another portrayal of a character, Kahir. He's the Black Knight that is chasing Ciri. Um,
Hmm.
in the series, he's a little bit of a symbol, and as an audience member, you don't know who Kahir is. Um,
Hmm.
you just know that Ciri keeps having these nightmares of that scene over and over again where he's chasing her, and you don't see a face or anything. It's just this black black knight running after her, and it's like terrifying her, and it's just making her go crazy. In the Netflix series, there is a face, and he plays an active role in being a sort of villain character.
Hmm.
He's violent and aggressive, very aggressive in the Netflix series. Um, in the books, only he's only just chasing Ciri, and I think it's very important that they didn't characterize him as that in the Netflix series because of what is to come in the future in his characterization. Because I won't say anything now,
Oh.
because I think his development is very fun to see organically, but he turns out to be not exactly what he is. And
Hmm.
the fact that we now already know what he is in the Netflix thing, it ruins that same sort of effect that the books portray, where he's just a symbol, you know?
Yeah, because a symbolic character can be a very powerful thing, and once you humanize them, it kind of it takes away some of the fear you
Right.
associate with it, which just kind of waters down the emotions a little bit.
Yes. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to shape that in the future, and it kind of upsets me a little bit because him as a character is actually I he's enjoyable in the books. Um,
Hmm.
okay, well, what were your least favorite parts?
I think I have to say, I mean, what I talked about with Yennefer's transformation, like I thought it was just I really liked the scene, the actual like the filming of it. Like I thought it was a gorgeous actual scene, but just the makeover aspect of it just always like irked me, you know.
Mhm.
Um, Especially the fact that like in order to become beautiful, in order to like get that power, like she does have to give up her fertility, which kind of goes along with this slightly misogynistic trope of like if a woman can't have kids, like she is less of a woman. She's not she's giving up part of her humanity in order for power, and it's just like
Mhm.
it's strange for me, you know.
They
It always just rubs me a little bit the wrong way.
like they were trying to play the feminist card, but it wasn't exactly the feminist
Yes.
card.
Yeah. Um, but that's that for me.
Mhm.
Um, what's your the most iconic character in your opinion?
Most iconic. Um, I really like Haskier, and I will have to say,
Yeah.
um, Haskier was butchered in the game. So it's like the one of the things that was just one of the rare faults in the games was that they
Hmm.
butchered Haskier or Dandelion. There's actually an audiobook and he pronounces it Dandelion, and
Jillian?
yeah, I keep being like tempted to say Dandelion, but it's Dandelion. But
I
I
like Jillian.
Dandelion. I know, right? It just has a sort of like rhythm to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like Haskier himself would change the pronunciation just to be extra. That sounds like a Haskier sort of thing to do. Um,
Yeah.
in the Netflix series, I think Dandelion was my most iconic character. In the books, Ciri is my favorite character. She's
Yeah.
just
From what I read in the comparisons, she's a little more like she's a little more spoiled in the books. Like she has a little more essentially like balance because in the show for me she is a little like she's kind of a goody goody. Like there's
mhm,
nothing really to dislike there except maybe that like she's a little bit naive.
right.
But like who can blame her? Who can
Yeah,
blame
who
her for
can blame
that?
her?
Um but I yeah, Dandelion, Yaskier, I mean he's just Toss a Coin to Your Witcher is a
Oh
very,
yes.
very, very catchy song. And every time he's on screen, he's just like he's throwing out the quips, and it's not to the point where it feels like forced cleverness, because you know sometimes when you're watching like media these days, like it sometimes the quips and the witty like remarks get to a point where you're like, I really like this just feels just so fake. I need you to have the characters be real for a second, but like Hasgear has those moments of realness and like he has those moments of like being really like genuine with Geralt, especially.
Yes. There.
Even though he is a cad and like
Yes. In the books, I'm glad that they translated it and that Haskier recognizes Geralt's sensitive side, and in the books, sometimes he's like, I see the look that you're making. I know how you are.
yeah,
To egg under.
he knows that he's like sulky and like he gets in his head about stuff and he's too serious. I
Mhm,
just love that.
right. Like Geralt doesn't want to save this damsel in distress, but he will go and save this damsel in distress.
Yeah.
Which he does plenty of times in the books, in the games, and ultimately in the Netflix series.
Yes.
Um, okay. What would you say is like your favorite sort of storyline that occurred within the Netflix series?
I really, really like the oh my gosh, it's the pact, the promise. I can't
Oh, the Jin?
oh the law of surprise. I
Oh,
think
that one.
that is like such a cool concept. I mean, like, oh, like how better to put like the forces of fate and destiny and entwine them in your story than to be like, oh yeah, there's this thing that like anybody can do and just be like, yep, I promise you, like the next good thing or like the next thing to happen to me, like that's yours.
The law of
I'm like,
surprise.
are you kidding me? Like, y'all are crazy for that, and I love it. And him, Geralt, being in that throne room, and after all that shit happened, and him him seeing the power of fate and the power of like fate being denied and being like, I guess I invoked the law of surprise, LMAO.
And then she just vomits, and then everyone's like,
Yeah,
"Oh my god."
everyone's like, oh my god. He's like, fuck. It's just like, oh my god. Are you kidding me?
Again, this weird like humor added into this dark fantasy world. Um,
Yes. Every time something goes wrong and he just says fuck, I'm just like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, Geralt.
Yeah, exactly. What about you?
Um, the one of my favorite story arcs, um, iconic Jin story arc, um,
Yes.
translated beautifully into the Netflix series. We got the drama of Haskier dying, um, the power
Yeah.
hungry exposure of Yennefer, and kind of manipulating this entire town through her
Yes.
magic.
Which I love. Again,
Iconic.
Feral Women.
Iconic. Um, the ending where Geralt sacrifices this like last wish to save this woman that he just met and kind of is falling in love with. And then the
Yes.
ending, translated also from the books, between Yennefer and Geralt. Iconic story arc. There's perfect beginning, climax, and resolution. Um, and also, besides that, there's a story in sort of Destiny called A Little Sacrifice that I actually cried reading the end of it because it was just really raw. Um, it it was one of those adventures between Haskier and Geralt, so you have that sort of dynamic going on, but Geralt sort of like falls in love with this other bard girl that Haskier is friends with, and it's not the usual sort of carnal relationship that Geralt has with a lot of women. Um,
Hmm.
it it was very poetic in this story, and the ending of it made me cry. And I think that story was instrumental in showing Geralt's sensitivity as well this sort of like soft-hearted, soft boy sort of side to him. It was a very stark contrast with the rest of the world that really fleshed it out. I'm gonna see if I can find a PDF and send it to you, and anybody else listening, I highly recommend reading it.
Yeah,
It
comment if you want this PDF.
But the beginning of the story starts off with Geralt. He like speaks different languages, right? With like these
Oh my
monsters,
gosh.
and
You know I love that.
but he has this job with this prissy nobleman who has been visiting this mermaid, and they can't communicate at all. But the noble hired Geralt to essentially go up to the mermaid and say, this man, he's going to force marry you. And the mermaid's kind of like, I don't really feel like it. And she just jumps back into the river. And the Prissy Noble is very upset with Geralt. So there's a little subplot about that overarching Geralt's love story. So very iconic. Will send.
I love that. I do want to see Geralt be soft. That's one of the things I'm hoping for in season two is that they'll give him a little bit of emotional vulnerability, like as a treat, you know?
As a treat, yes. He does have those like vulnerable moments with Roach, his like various horses.
Definitely. Um, okay, before you get on to the last question, what was your reaction to hearing that the producers essentially forgot to age Haskier?
I don't recall that. Oh,
Um,
because
because they were talking about how it does span like like a long time, like a good
oh
amount
yes,
of years, and they essentially just forgot they forgot to age him like a real human would age.
yes. I that makes sense. I kept seeing memes on Tumblr and I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I do realize now, yes, there's that wonky timeline thing. They just kept going back and forth to the point where they they forgot to change how Haskiell looked. But yeah, I mean, by the end of the Netflix series, Triss is like not Triss, Yennefer. Yennefer is like 70 and Geralt is
Yeah,
50, you know? And the meme I keep seeing is that Haskier just moisturizes.
yeah, which is pretty good. Like that one scene on the Dragon Hunt episode where Yennefer and Haskier are talking, like they're quipping at each other, and she's like, "The crow's feet are new," and it's like, but he doesn't look any older.
No.
He doesn't,
He just looks
and it was
normal.
just boggling to me because he should be a lot older.
Maybe it's for the best because Haskira kind of preys on women. So if he had like gray hair, then
Right. Maybe he got something magic to happen. I have no idea.
a little bit of magic. No, his youth energy just
Just radiating
extends.
out.
Just extends out. Okay, I will also um I mentioned Triss's name and I got absolutely triggered as as soon as I said Triss's name. But
Yes.
in the books, Triss is an asshole. Like
Yeah. And it's like a minor character too, right?
yes, she is a minor character. She doesn't look as bright or she's not at all as, you know, bubbly as she is in the games either. And in the Netflix series, she's very scholarly. She seems more of an introvert and very poised in the Netflix series. In comparison
Yes.
to the books, she essentially acts a like a 15-year-old high school girl, and she actually assaults Geralt. Um, I'm not quite sure
Really.
how to feel. I feel like maybe they could have just excluded Triss as a character altogether in the Netflix series. Um, I don't know. I definitely prefer her portrayal in the Netflix series, but it's not
Yeah, she's
accurate.
like helpful friend, and I'm like, cool. I love her.
Yeah, and the actress, oh my gosh, she's gorgeous.
She's so gorgeous. Yeah.
But in the books, man, she definitely plays a bigger role in what would be the upcoming season of The Witcher, so we'll see how she is portrayed through that. Um, all right, well, our last question, just what is what are your favorite lines of the Witcher series?
I'm gonna ask you to go first for this one again.
Okay, my first bullet is hmm. With every time
Hmm.
Geralt says hmm, he
Yes.
replicates it perfectly from the games, which Henry Cavill has stated that he's played all the games religiously. I think he's
I
read the
love
books.
him for that.
But he said like he spent time trying to replicate um, Geralt's voice from the games, and it's just an iconic thing that the entire fandom, who is a huge fan of the games, completely just fangirl every time Henry Cavill says, hmm. And then they added fuck after it in the Netflix series. It's
Yeah.
perfection. Absolute comedy gold. Um, I my second bullet here is people like to invent monsters and monstrosities, then they seem less monstrous themselves. A quote from Geralt. Um, and I
I
think
love that.
it's such a powerful quote because there's this whole theme where Geralt ends up killing people more than monsters because people are the actual monsters. And it plays into also the world building that we talked about where um, this is just a shitty fantasy world and everybody seems to be in it for themselves. And
Yeah.
and but the ironic part is they view Geralt as a monster, and which also
Yes.
plays into portraying Geralt as a soft-hearted, sensitive guy, even though he's portrayed as it's just interweaving themes and ideas, and this quote just really um, encapsulates this whole complex motif.
Also, on that note, I absolutely love like the running theme throughout like what you've told me of the books and the series like that like monsters like aren't the monsters we're looking for like to view as monsters aren't necessarily like the real monsters.
Hmm.
I know that I'm not saying that very eloquently,
Yes, yes, yes.
but sometimes like the monsters are the people around us. Like
Right.
and not everything that looks monstrous is necessarily monstrous. Like Yennefer, like her original appearance, like she's a hunchback, like she has like a deformed face and like people view her as like a monster essentially. People view Geralt because he looks scary as a monster. Like even though like they're not the bad guys in this situation.
Hmm.
Like
It
it's
definitely.
yeah, it's just it's an interesting take on like what makes a monster. Like the dichotomy between like monster and human, which I think is always like a fun theme to kind of
Right.
mess around with. It's challenging, you know.
I think the Netflix series needed to include some sort of story because a lot of the stories in the first two books include Geralt becoming friends with the monsters. And he
Yes.
has like conversations with them, and in talking with the monsters, he kind of like sees himself, and you know, but actual quote unquote normal people see them as monsters, but Geralt is just, cracking a joke with this with this monster over here, and you're sitting there like, huh, who are the monsters really? Oh, normal people.
Oh, normal people. Yeah, normal people are the monsters. Like Yennefer's father, like he sold his daughter, like he's a monster.
Yeah,
Like the Stregobor, like killing all these children, like
yeah,
he's a monster. Like even though he was like trying to do a good thing, oh, I don't know. Stregobor is a complicated
yeah.
character. But like what like was Fenris?
Fenris,
What was her name?
Tisea,
Yeah. Um, no, Ren? Am I getting it wrong?
who
Who
are
was
you
the girl in
talking?
the first episode?
The girl, oh, Renfrey, yes.
Renfrey, yes. How she was like she was kind of like pointed out by Stragobor like she's a monster, you know?
Hmm.
Even though we haven't necessarily seen her do anything that would imply that just because like of the circumstances of her birth, like she's a monster.
She,
Like things that are out of her control, which is kind of the same for Geralt. He's like and he believes himself not to be human, like
right. He identifies himself as a monster.
yes, which is a very interesting choice based on the whole thing of the books, like the
Yeah.
dichotomy.
I think some of my favorite storylines are he's like best friends with like vampires, and that's also like, a monster, but
Yeah,
they're very a few of them are a few kind-hearted vampires.
yeah,
Um
which I love. I love the kind-hearted monster trope.
I'm
I
so
think it's
excited. If the Netflix series adapts the future books, um as accurately as the books, then we have an exciting D&D campaign to watch.
yeah, definitely.
Because Geralt has this really weird, and most people like D&D parties are the most motley group. They don't look like they are together at all.
Yes.
I think I think Geralt has that sort of moment with his traveling party. That I'm really excited for. Um,
Yeah, with the him, the white-haired non-human like monster killer, his adopted daughter, the sweet like little like ashen-haired child,
plus half
Jaskier, who's just, you know,
in his
him.
balloon pants.
Exactly, and Yennefer, like the very serious, like purple-eyed, like super powerful sorceress, and like, oh, a vampire too?
Yeah. Um,
It's very fun. Oh, and his horse. Sorry,
for
didn't mean to leave Roach out. Sorry to all the Roach fans out there.
Roach fans, I mean Roach is up on the roof right now, so um, my favorite character of the series has yet to appear, but she's also a part of like the little adventuring party. Absolutely fantastic. Um,
Also, I did decide on my quote. I really like that people linked by destiny will always find each other. I think that's just so sappy.
Man, what if my
Love
soulmate is out there?
I'm right here,
Oh,
Cleo.
oh my gosh. Of course my
um,
soulmate would do this with me.
ahaha.
Uh-huh.
um, anyway, I think that is all that we wanted to talk about today. Do you have any closing comments on The Witcher?
Um, I have to say, um, all three versions of The Witcher are different, right? And
Mhm.
after looking into this, I was a little bit upset with the Netflix series not, portraying some sort of Slavic culture or whatnot. But after discussing about this and kind of like reading things a little bit more, I'm kind of happy how things are and how distinct each version is. And even though the games are not canon, in my heart, I like to think all three worlds are parallel universes of how
Yes,
things
I
could
love that.
be. I definitely have a love for all three and appreciate the highlights of the highlights of each universe. So that's my closing comment.
I love that. Okay, well, I think that is it for us
What about
today.
your closing comment?
My closing comments, hmm, fuck.
Just like
That's it.
Geralt.
Yeah,
Fuck.
that's it for me.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I'm gonna upload this to YouTube, so for all our friends that missed us can hear our lovely voices while they do their chores or something.
Yeah, something.
Something like that. So, thanks everyone for listening, and that is all.
That is all. What world are we doing next?